Hi, Hi everyone. This is Gretchen Shaw with NCADV. We're starting just a couple minutes early to allow people to join the webinar. So we're going to be, if you see us playing around a bit, we're just trying to figure out how to do a couple of things. So bear with us and we will start the presentation shortly. Oh, there it is. Okay. Excellent. So whatever happened, I'm able to see you, Kath.
Oh, great. Can other folks see me too? Am I live?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah. I think
Thanks for hopping on the call so soon. We're really excited. The numbers are growing. We reckon we're going to be sold out and hit the 500 maximum in the next couple of minutes. So thank you, everyone, for taking the time just to show up today. Great to connect with you.
Literally. All right.
Literally.
We've hit the max. Webinar is full. That's amazing.
Wow.
Oh my word. Okay, so we're getting messages.
I'm going to try not to get distracted by that, Gretchen. I'm just going to focus on you. So it's just you and I are just having a conversation.
Absolutely. No, this is fabulous. I'm just excited. So excited. So I've somehow, oh, there's the audience here. Okay, excellent. All right, well, since the webinar is full, I say let's go ahead and get started because obviously not more people can, no one else can join at this point. So we thank you all so much for being here today. We are utterly blown away by the number of registrants we had for this webinar. It literally came very close to 2,000. So those of you who are participants today are the lucky ones, and you're able to get onto the live presentation, which is hopefully will be fulfilling and wonderful for you. So of course, as we're preparing to begin, if you feel like it, feel free to chat with one another in the chat box and let us know how things are going with you. We also have, get familiar with your control panel. We have a couple of handouts for you relevant to the webinar. And then we do encourage you to post your questions in the question box. Time permitting, we will be trying to take questions specific to building resilience and resiliency. So we certainly understand that there are a lot of questions regarding COVID-19 specifically right now and what that means for both advocates, program survivors in particular. And just to clarify, today's webinar is not going to be focused specifically on providing technical assistance. We're here to offer what we're hoping is solace and tools for maintaining a bit of sanity in these crazy times. So as I mentioned, here's what your control panel should look like. Your handouts would be listed in the handouts section, and then you can post your question in the question box. We're going to be monitoring that throughout the webinar, and we'll be pausing as we're able to answer some of those. Of course, this session is being recorded, and a recording will be sent to you following the presentation. We'll also be including the PowerPoint slides, the link to the handout, which will be included in the PowerPoint, and a certificate of participation. Following you, once you close out of the webinar, you will be prompted for a survey. Please take a minute to fill that out because your feedback is important to us. So like I mentioned, these times, as we all know, are incredibly trying, and I'm sure you all have many questions regarding COVID-19 and domestic violence. As such, NCADV has created a specific page regarding COVID-19 and domestic violence where you'll be able to find resources. You'll be able to connect with NCADV. Of course, if you're able, we, like all groups, are in need of support, and we're highly dependent on donors like you. You'll also be able to see legislative updates and action alerts. You'll be able to link to other webinars and educational opportunities, and then see a good bit of information regarding media coverage. Additionally, we are offering another free webinar next week. If you haven't done so already, please go to ncadv.org/webinars. Next week's webinar on Thursday, April 30th is domestic violence safety planning during COVID-19. So we're partnering with the Jewish Family Service Association of Cleveland to present that. And much like this one, we expect it to be full. So we highly encourage you to visit that page and be part of that if you can. As I mentioned, again, normally we offer these webinars to just our membership and for a fee for non-members. But for the next month, we're going to be offering a few webinars for free. But if you have the ability to support NCADV and make a donation to become a member, please consider doing so. We're highly dependent on wonderful people like you. Also, throughout today's webinar, we encourage you to follow NCADV on Twitter and use the hashtag #AdvoChat. I'm not too familiar with Twitter. I'm resisting social media, but others of you may know what we're talking about there. So today we want to take a quick poll. Some of these are just questions for NCADV's use only. So feel free to answer what you feel like answering, and it's okay if you don't. We're very interested in knowing who is on today's call. So please, if you could self-identify with whatever umbrella you fall under, we would appreciate that. We'll take a moment. Oh, holy moly. So it looks like about 80% of you, 75 to 80% of you are working within a DVNSA program, which makes sense. We have some who identify as a victim and survivor, case managers, counselors, and then other. So Lynn, I don't know if it's possible to share the results.
Wow, that's helpful.
Sharing full results. I think I see, there you go. Excellent. Okay, that's what we thought. Wonderful. Okay. Let's do the next question, please, Miss Lynn. Lynn Brewer is our communications director here at NCADV. And she's savvier than I am at this administrative stuff. So where are you located? I'll give folks a few minutes to respond to that. It looks like most people are on the East Coast, Midwest. About 20% of you are in the southern states and Puerto Rico. All right, Lynn, if you wouldn't mind sharing those results. Great. Okay, let's go on to the next question, please. All right, and this is for NCADV's internal use. We often get asked about ethnic identity, racial or ethnic identity of those we serve. So if you feel like answering this, we'd appreciate it, and you certainly don't have to. It looks like we've got about 66% who self-identify as white or Caucasian, about 21% Hispanic or Latinx, Black African American, and then American Indian or Alaska Native. Great, thank you. Oh, please, we're almost done. And then, yes, it's helpful to know if you live in an urban, suburban, or rural area. Yeah, it looks like most are in the rural areas, followed by suburban and then urban. Lynn, if you wouldn't mind sharing those responses.
Interesting.
Yeah, many rural. Okay. Fabulous. And our last question. We are just checking in with people to see how resilient you're feeling lately. Well, I'm happy to see that a few of you are feeling incredibly resilient. That's wonderful. Most are feeling somewhat resilient, others are feeling pretty resilient, and only a small percentage are not feeling resilient at all. Wonderful. We've got some healthy audience today, which I'm happy to see. And if you wouldn't mind sharing those results, great. Okay, well, wonderful. Well, hopefully this webinar will certainly help boost your resiliency or your knowledge of resiliency and building resiliency. I am going to move on to introducing today's presenter, Kath Kane. Kath Kane is a qualified community education worker with a background in anti-poverty programs and gender-based violence in the UK. While in London, Kath has held the position of strategic lead officer in 3 local government offices in central London. In those roles, she was responsible for strategy, policy, and provision addressing gender-based violence. Until 2011, Kath has worked as an independent consultant with local government, housing sector, not-for-profits, and the mayor's office in London. Kath is a domestic homicide review chair and trainer. She delivered the Home Office Commission training to DHR chairs across England in 2013. Kath is a professional coach specializing in women's empowerment and leadership, and founder of her 90-day signature program, Unshakable Ambition. Kath has worked directly with women, children, and young people affected by violence and abuse for over 20 years. She has extensive experience in the development and delivery of survivor-centered multi-agency initiatives addressing risk in intimate partner violence, familial violence, stalking, sexualized violence, and coercive control. Central to her approach is culture change that challenges victim blaming and supports non-specialist services, offers safer interventions to survivors and their children. So thank you so much, Kath, and I will now turn over the presentation to you.
Wow. Hola, everyone. Hi, hello. It is an absolute privilege to be here. Thank you, Gretchen, for that introduction. It did sound very long. I didn't realize I had done so much stuff. So I hope we haven't lost anyone in that long introduction. It's time to wake up. Here we are. We're in the seminar now. It is an absolute privilege to be here to make a contribution to your webinar series. And I have to confess, I have rewritten this several times because the world has absolutely transformed since our initial conversations in February. It was really helpful to get those polls, so I've got a better sense of who I'm talking to and who's with me, you know, who's with us in this webinar. So thank you for that. And what I want to say to everyone out there who's listening, and for those of you that are going to get the recording after this webinar, just the work that you do, the work that you and your professional community do is difficult at the best of times. We know that, and it's now got even harder. There's a huge impact, not only on individuals and children, but on whole family systems and communities. We know that about domestic abuse. And certainly with everything that's happening around the COVID outbreak, that's just making things even harder on families and individuals and communities. And I've worked in frontline services. As I've trained as a community education worker in Scotland, I know what it feels like when you're working on the front line. You've got very little resources. It's really tough. It's really tough to do what you want to do sometimes because organisations are quite often stretched anyway. And there's something, when I reflect back on that, it just really reminds me of how disempowering it can feel. You can feel when you have this responsibility to help others, but you don't have the resources or the equipment or the tools to do it yourselves. And as demand increases for services, which it does, because if we do our jobs properly and we increase awareness about the need and the social pandemic that is domestic abuse, then more people in crisis, more people try to access services, and even well-funded organisations start to feel the strain. So it's tough. Although I'm not with you exactly in your location, I think there may be some similarities and common shared experiences from my work that I can take into the seminar that's going to help you. Learning. as I said, I trained as a community education worker. I wanted just to say a little something about learning. One of the most useful things I think I absorbed at that time when I was training is learning is not a comfortable process. Learning is a journey. Yeah, it's something that's part of our professional practice, and it's something that informs our practice. And I can honestly say it's not anything I've stopped doing. Just the longer I'm in this work, the more almost I realize I have to learn. So it's a process for sure. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So today's, so the other little thing I want to say about learning that has helped me when I was, certainly when I was training and when I was relying on managers to be good at their jobs, was if I understood the why I needed to do something, why it was relevant, that really helped me a lot. When we know why something is important, then we can figure out how we're going to do it. And I still use that in most of the projects and programs that I've worked in. Why are we doing something? I always ask that question, and then I work out the how. Because when the going gets tough, what we fall back on always is our knowledge, is our experience, is our values and our ethics. And ultimately we rely on ourselves. So in today's webinar, Gretchen mentioned this, I'm not here to tell you what you should be doing operationally, procedurally, or specifically within your organization. It's not the detail. I'm not going to tell you what I think you should be doing. Even in ordinary times, the work that you do is rarely simple or easy, and you are the experts, yeah? But I'm here to encourage your curiosity. I'm here to be fully present with you. I'm here to acknowledge your day-to-day contribution and the difficult work that you do. I'm here right now to serve you and to share what I hope are useful insights that support you right now. So I'm going to make this as interactive as I can with Gretchen and Lynn's help. We're here to hold space so that you can feel connected to others. We've got 500 people on this call from all over the United States, maybe beyond. I don't know if you can see the map behind me, but I was just looking at that earlier today, imagining where you might all be across the various states of the United States. So thank you again for joining us here. Just before I get into some of the main presentation, I have prepared a PDF document for you of resilience in leadership tools that we're going to make available today, live on the webinar. Is that correct, Gretchen?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I was reading a question.
How's the chat doing? Is it interesting?
It's good. A few people are having some technical difficulties.
Okay. That's good. We're just getting into it.
Yes, so the PDFs are what you want to pay attention to. We deleted the Word document just prior to the presentation, so if it's not opening for you, just don't worry about it. Okay,
but you will get a copy of my Resilience and Leadership Tools, which is going to include some of the exercises and things and information from today. And in that document, there's also a link where you can connect with me on Facebook. So you'll get that information, and I'll remind you a little bit later in the presentation too. So today's webinar, I'm going to share some insights and tools. We're going to have a little bit of Q&A further on, based on some of the questions that you've submitted. Time allowing, we might be able to respond in real time to the chat. I'm going to check in with you at various points through the chat. And let us know if you find this useful, helpful, if it particularly resonates. It would be great, because literally at the moment, I'm just sitting in my bedroom talking to my laptop. So a little bit of interaction would be great. I want to be of service to you, and I want this information to be very relevant. Okay, so as I was preparing for this webinar, I said to myself, where can I anchor us, me and us, with the knowledge that this will pass, this strange times that we're in, that this will pass, we can survive, and that there is a fulfilling future that we can build on, that we can build from the rubble, yeah? And the thoughts and the images that came to my mind were the times I've listened to and I've supported women leave abusive partners. The more dangerous and the more coercive the abuse, the harder and the more dangerous it is for that individual to leave, particularly if they have caring responsibilities. I'm sure many of you know this. But yet we ask her As practitioners, as support workers, as professionals, we ask her in the midst of what's often the peak of the danger when she's ready to flee, a time of paralyzing fear and threat, to take that leap of faith and to trust us that this will pass and that she can create a fulfilling future from the rubble. And it just strikes me that there's a parallel here and a teaching moment for us all at a really deep level about the complexity and the impact of trauma on our ordinary abilities to function and to trust and to make decisions. So I just want to take a moment to recognize the courage and the faith and that leap of faith that all survivors take wherever you are in the world. When you made that decision and you took action to create a different life. And I want to acknowledge anyone and everyone, whether you've done this personally or professionally, who has listened with compassion, who has listened with an open heart, who has tried to support a family, an individual, that human being or that community on their path to a better, more hopeful future. And from this place of connection, I want to take you into a relaxation exercise. I want to take you into this notion of mindfulness and how we can use this in our practice to ground us. Mindfulness techniques are a fundamental tool for managing stress. I absolutely rely on them, that's for sure. And is a powerful tool for managing what we also sometimes call in this work, vicarious trauma. So I'm going to take you through a simple exercise that was given to me by my business associate, Aisha Ali, who is a teacher of mindfulness. So this is called body scan exercise. This is in the handout, the PDF document that you're going to get, but I'd really like you to do this with me now. The breath, so just get comfortable in your tool. This is a tool. Get comfortable in your chair. The breath is a tool for being present in the moment, and it allows us to focus without judgment. This is a simple exercise that's just going to help us relax at a deep level. And it's also a foundational exercise about trust. We can look at this at a deeper level. So get comfortable in your chair, wherever you are, and trust you'll be held by the chair. And allow your body to fall into the chair and breathe. Just take a normal breath and relax. Now gently, just scan your body. Not judging, merely noticing. Notice the areas of trust, relaxation, and notice the distrust, the tightness. Remember to breathe. Just follow your breath. Now you can begin with any area, but you may wish to scan and start with the head and scan down. Noticing if that part of your body is trusting or not trusting. Breathe throughout the scan, just simply noticing. Now you can encourage trust by focusing your breathing and encouraging the body to relax. This should be done with kindness and the body adjustment if needed. Just keep breathing just for a few more breaths and trust that you will be held by the chair and the earth. When you're ready, just gradually come back to me and open your eyes. So when I was preparing for this seminar, I really agonized over the question, what can I give folks that's useful and meaningful to them at this time? And I turned to my fellow poet and business associate, Aisha Ali, who I mentioned gave me that exercise. I turned to her for guidance. Aisha is an associate consultant for my business. She has a specialism in heart-centered mindfulness practice and community empowerment work. She's a writer, she's a poet. No, keep on that first slide, Gretchen. Not yet. Go back. First slide. Thank you very much. She is a. Oh, that's it. Hang on there. Thank you. She's so Aisha is a mindfulness teacher and a writer and a poet, and just generally offers sage wisdom. I'm sure you've got friends and colleagues and women in your community to do that very thing. So I asked her that question, and she coached me with a great question. She said, "What am I telling my audience that they don't already know?" And I keep hearing at the minute, we're in these unprecedented times. And it led me to think, well, where could I find inspiration and connection from history that resonates with the now, with what we might be experiencing now? Or is it really unprecedented times? I guess was the question that I had. Because often, well, sometimes what's in our past and has relevance and teaching and learning comes from that, growth comes from that. So I remember, I'm sure some of you must have seen this movie called Freedom Writers. I think it was made in 2007. And it was based on a book, The Freedom Writer's Diary by Ellen Gruel. I hope I've pronounced her name correctly. And the students that she worked with in high school who compiled this book out of their lived experience and their diaries, their diary entries. She was their English class teacher at a school in Long Beach, California. And I Googled Freedom Foundation. So I know the Freedom Foundation exists. It sounds like a fascinating organization, and it works to empower students and educators, and also an education system that graduates students prepared for college and career. So it sounds like a really fantastic organization and thing that's come out of this true story, this lived experience. And what I wanted to share with you was what resonated. Well, many things resonated with me when I watched this movie and I started to understand the story a bit more. But what resonated with me in particular, I wanted to share with you today was, one, the power of the creative. Everyone has a story. And expressing or recording our stories can be transformational, both for the writer and for the reader, or the broadcaster and the listener. And for the young people, the second thing that really struck me, for the young people in Erin Gruen's class, a major breakthrough came when she introduced them to stories about the Holocaust. And they connected with that experience. Their lived experience of growing up in Long Beach was reflected in the history of Holocaust survivors. Now, sometimes it can be surprising where we find our connections and our parallels. And I remembered in the back of my mind this quote from high school. And I would not have read this book if it hadn't been on the reading list at school. So if you could move to the next slide, Gretchen, I want to share this quote. This is from a book written in 1859 by someone called Charles Dickens. I'm going to read this to you. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. Now, I've heard the phrase unprecedented circumstances constantly more recently, but here's something that was written in 1859 and something that I learned at school that just came back to me just now and highlighted for me where I think we are in this very strange place where the normal is not normal What we knew doesn't really exist anymore in quite the same way. And there's many, many contradictions. But out of this winter of despair or this darkness, there's also a light. And we can also see the creativity and community and the coming together and the humanity in folks. So I just wanted to put this to you, that even in dark times and difficult times and things that we may think are unprecedented and never happened before, there is quite often someone who's gone through it. And quite often poets and writers and creatives can give us some comfort when we're trying to navigate these hostile territories. So I'm inviting you now with me just to consider where this may be relevant, where this might be some source of inspiration to you at this minute, or be reflective. Maybe it's acknowledging how you feel. Maybe it's reflecting some of the confusion that you're seeing in your life and in your work at the moment. Because our situation is unusual, and we may not have experienced this level of fear and uncertainty that connects many of us just now. But it is not an unprecedented reality. Because this time that this book was written around the French Revolution, that was a time of dramatic and violent and terrifying political and social change with many, many deaths. And when we think of war, we think of natural disasters, we think of sexual violence and domestic violence. You know, these are often unprecedented levels of terror and fear that individuals are living with. So when we continually go over negative stuff, emphasizing the danger and the severity doesn't help us. So I'm inviting you just to open your mind to the possibility that even in some of these dark times, there's some real light and creativity and opportunities for connection that can enhance how we feel. The World Health Organization, on March the 12th, the World Health Organization released a briefing paper called Mental Health and Psychosocial Considerations During the COVID Outbreak. Has anyone seen this? Is this news to anyone? Be interested, that comes up in the chat. This document includes guidance to health professionals. So it was specifically, the majority of it was written for health professionals and in healthcare settings, but there was also a general guidance section. If we could move to the next slide, please, Gretchen. Thank you. So under the general population guidance, item number 3, if for the thorough people that want the detail, it's number 3 on their list. Minimizing watching. This is what they advise: minimize watching, reading, and listening to the news that causes you to feel anxious or distressed. That was one of their top 3 tips for us at the general population at this particular time. They also advised us to seek information only from trusted sources and take practical steps. Seek information updates at specific times. And the other thing I think is interesting is they really got this nailed, is that the sudden and the near constant stream of news, which is very easy for any of us and all of us to get sucked into, they can cause us to feel worried just by that sensation of us getting drawn into that constant newsfeed of negativity. So the medicine for that, or the alternative to that, is get the facts, not the rumors and misinformation. Distinguish the facts from the rumors, because facts can help to minimize fear. So I just want to do a check-in, Gretchen. Is there any chat coming through? Is that been relevant to folks? Any comments with feedback? Or have I relaxed everyone so much that they're just going with the flow?
You've relaxed me. I like
okay, it's good.
Your accent. Yeah, someone has asked if you could share the name of the article again, please.
Yes, the World Health Organization. It is World Health Organization, Mental Health and Psychosocial Considerations During COVID-19 Outbreak.
Excellent. Yes, and we have had feedback that it's very relevant and that people are talking about this all the time at work. So wonderful. Again, just a quick reminder, if you have questions or want to share with us, please put those in the question box. I don't have access to the chat box, so if you're entering there, I won't see it.
Okay, well, great, thank you. And just as a reminder, as I'm going through this process, if at any point you want to just do that body scan exercise again and just relax into your breath, then I would encourage you to do that. Because maybe as I'm talking about some of these things, it maybe is a trigger around some folks' anxiety. So just, you're in control. You can take a breath and just take a little time out whenever you need to and just relax into your breath. Okay, could we move on to the next slide, please, Gretchen? What I also want to just feed back to you is we had an amazing response to the pre-registration questions, the questionnaires. 612 of you responded, which is fantastic. And I've looked through the responses. I haven't been able to do this I want to do a summary for you now and just reflect back some things. I can't do this in detail because there was so many responses, so many questions, but it is a really helpful, informative collection of feedback from your sector and from folks that are doing similar work about what currently you've tried to do to implement changes and strategies for building self-care and resilience in your workplaces or personally and individually, and also what are some of the key challenges. So this is not highly scientific. I don't have any data from the spreadsheets for the data geeks that really like that stuff, but what I will do is just give you a little bit of an overview of some of the things that were coming through. And I put your organizations into 3 key categories. There are organizations that are being proactive and have started to make implementations and changes fairly quickly. There are others that are making some changes or beginning to make some changes. And finally, there's a 3rd category where there appears to be no changes, or it's been very difficult to implement changes. So let me just go back to the first category for those organizations that are being proactive and doing some excellent work to protect, motivate, and validate the staff so that they can support the people that they serve through the pandemic. And this is one key thing that jumped out at me when I noticed those responses, is that organizations are not just thinking about it on an individual basis, not just thinking about extra support and supervision or guidance around self-care. They're actually thinking about what can we as an organization, what can we as a team do? We're in this together, and how can we make this easier on everyone and be as effective as we can? So remote working, I'm sure many of you are in the situation where you are doing that now. And there's also social distancing measures have been put into place. Extra team supervision and extra individual supervision have also been introduced in these organizations. Meditation or guided imagery practice. So clearly there's some organizations and some practitioners that are very familiar with some of these techniques, these mindfulness techniques, and already proactively building it into the work context and the organizational development. Staff bonding time was something that I noticed in a few organizations, a real effort to not just go through the checklist and tick box and ensure staff and people do their jobs, but also to create that connection and a sense of bonding with each other as we go through this pandemic together. Access to allied professionals. I saw there was some, legal lawyers and teaming up more closely with advocacy projects, social workers, mental health professionals. There's clearly some collaborations, connections going on between allied professionals as people are coming together in a multi-agency way to support survivors. Policy changes. Some organizations have adapted their policies. I don't have obviously the detail of that. I don't have a copy of any of these policies, but that tells me that what managers are doing and practitioners are doing is building it into the day-to-day running of the organization, because we could be in this situation for a little bit longer. Some organizations have put in place paid leave and open communication, really being mindful of the need for more often, more frequent, more transparent communication between and across teams and individuals. I love this one, patience. I don't know if you're on the call, if you wrote that, you're a manager, probably it sounds like a manager that might say that. Maybe it's an advocate, but I thought that was a really insightful contribution and strategy for building in resilience to your organization and your teams, in that we all need to be a little bit more patient and compassionate at the moment because we're all under pressure. Some organizations are also introducing support and training that recognizes the impact of fear of the unknown. This is such an important point because none of us really know how things are going to work out. So that feeling and that fear of uncertainty is something that, yeah, it probably is something else we need to think of on a daily and regular basis about how we support our teams, how we support each other, our colleagues, and how we support survivors, because of course it's going to be even harder for those folks that we're trying to help. One good example of just a practical thing that you may want to incorporate into your office environment is an appreciation board. I thought this was a great idea, so that on a regular basis, folks can be appreciated for what they have achieved or what they have done. And I saw that one organization had established a care committee. So clearly some of you are putting together task forces or senior management or a mix of staff across your organization to form a care committee and think strategically at all levels of the organization about what might need to change and what could help folks do their job. So that was just a selection of things from the organizations that have been very proactive. There were organizations that were making some changes. They made an effort to respond to the need, but the response was quite basic, or it was often basic, and placed a lot of the responsibility for self-care on the individual. So they're going some way, which is great, but it may have limited impact if the responsibility is solely lying with the individual member of staff for self-care. Yeah. So things like online information are good and useful. Some organizations were sending out self-care reminders to employees to access mental health services, but it was, again, elective. It didn't seem like it was something that all employees were expected to do, or that there was particular follow-up from management. So I know it's really difficult when there's so many other things going on, but online information on its own without the connection and the human connection or the support of a manager to help access or implement some things, you may find that you have limited success in terms of that being of benefit across the organization. Others are saying, other examples where staff members were sending out fun memes and cheering each other up, keeping each other's morale up via that way. There's a lot of pressure, and I do understand this, with the logistics of having to put in place remote working, or the health and safety issues around reducing the spread of the outbreak. The logistics, particularly if you're working in shelters, are going to be really tricky, and the pressure to have medical standards of cleanliness in shared spaces where you are supporting individuals, where to a certain extent you can instruct your employees to do things in a particular way if you have line management responsibility, but you don't quite have the same influence when it's your residents or your clients. So that was causing stress and anxiety to workers in organizations, as well as, I'm sure, survivors that are in shelters and trying to access support services. I don't have an answer for that. I'm acknowledging that logistically, I can imagine this must be an absolute headache at grassroots level and frontline level, and really difficult to navigate for managers and for staff, as well as for survivors. And difficult, some organizations were saying it's really difficult to implement team bonding because of our schedules and remote working. You know, and yes, again, we can find connections online with online working, but the amount of friends, because we're now using Zoom, aren't we, and Skype and FaceTime, we're using this for our social life as well, and our back bedroom discos and our family gatherings, and people are zoomed out. So I understand, you know, it's not ideal, but certainly some teams are taking the initiative to where they can maximize the use of technology to connect with the work and with survivors and with colleagues. Finally, organizations that hadn't implemented changes, made changes or implemented strategies, some of the things that I could see that were coming up there was staff were feeling there was very little encouragement or no mention of self-care. It was kind of business as usual, which to some extent is what everyone is having to do. It is business as usual. We have a job, there is a job to be done. But if that is done without any consideration of the impact on some of the other psychosocial things that we've just talked about and the need for connection and the impact of uncertainty, then it's going to enhance, I would say, or increase the whole team response to the stress and the trauma. Yeah. There are certainly some organisations had a willingness and a desire to make changes, but due to the impact of dealing with the stress levels in the organisation and staff members feeling very stressed, and the lack of structure and very limited resources, it was just organisations, I had a sense, or some organisations are feeling quite overwhelmed. Yeah, and that is understandable, I would say, in the current situation. And again, all I would invite you to do, all I would invite you to do there is, if this is your organisation, your situation, take a breath, recognise it's difficult, and do what you can to ground yourself, and where you can have those conversations with colleagues to encourage kind of deeper connection that perhaps supports each other, to put in place some self-care. Yeah. Okay, could we move on to the next slide, Gretchen?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that we've really got some good responses.
Oh, have we? Okay, all right. Actually, go back to that slide. Don't go on to that next slide just yet. Okay. Let's just check in with the chat.
Yep. Oh, sorry, I'm still learning all this.
Yeah, that's, thank you. No, go back. Oh, wrong way. It is live, folks, and you see, we all have human moments. Isn't this wonderful?
It's wonderful, and I have to say, you all are just lovely people. I'm enjoying seeing these comments come through. So a few people.
Could you go back to slide number 11, Gretchen? Go the other way if you can.
Oh, my bad. That one?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Perfect. Oh. Thank you so much. Yeah, tell me, what are folks saying in the chat?
So some people are sharing some resources that they have developed, and we
excellent.
Encourage those. So just as a segue, we are collecting responses and resources. We know the information is coming out fast and furiously. So if you go to the COVID page that we shared at the beginning of the webinar, it's ncadv.org/COVID-19 and domestic violence, all separated by dashes. You'll find a booklet of resources. We're just collecting them and we're organizing them by topic as best we can so that it's a bit searchable. But if you have a resource that you've developed in response to COVID-19, we encourage you to send that to us. There's a way that you can submit that within the document, or you can email it directly to me and I'll share that. So that's a side note for those of you wanting to share that information. Other people have shared, I thought this was a great idea. Emily shared that their organization created a pandemic leave policy that would allow employees leave in addition to their yearly allowance of paid time off. I think that is a great way to say thank you to the people who are working so hard and encouraging more self-care and time off. It looks like there are a Facebook group called Heart Hunters that has grown to over 800,000 members. That's amazing. Wow. Also, A Window Between Worlds has an art-based program that is focused on overall well-being. We will share that in our resource book as well. There was one question, Kath, that I thought might be a good time, if you have a minute, to answer here. Let me get down to that. I'm sorry, there are a lot of people chatting and it's wonderful.
Okay, that's good. That's good. This is great because this is what we wanted, isn't it? That folks connect and that you're the experts. You share what you're doing in your localities, your organizations. Wonderful. This is great. Such a positive momentum for everyone. Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. So Kelly says that she works in a domestic violence agency. And can you provide some tips to assist clients who are in distress during this time as they are sheltered in place with their children? Do you have thoughts on that, or things that
in terms of clients being distressed and how to support those clients?
Yeah, maybe calming suggestions, things advocates can do with
the kids. Yeah, well, I'd be inclined also to put that out to the chat if anyone got real practical resources that can help. Is it Carlin? Is that the person's name?
Kelly.
Kelly, sorry, Kelly. For sure, if there's anyone that can share something really practical, that would be great. If it was me, you know what I do when I don't know something? I tap into my networks, my colleagues. I always know, it's like phone a friend and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you know. I pretty much know someone. If I don't have the answer to something, I know someone that knows it and has already done it. I lean into those folks. So I would definitely, the hardest thing can sometimes be asking or saying, I don't know how to do this, or I'm not sure what we could do here. Once we get over that inhibition and we realize that for all of us, we've not been in this situation before. So all of us, even folks with lots of experience and lots of confidence, I guarantee there's many times during the day when they're thinking, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to respond to this. So my first thing is let's try and get over the inhibition of thinking we should know, because actually things are much harder and more complicated in a minute. The second thing I would say is lean in and reach out to folks that you think may be able to help you at a practical level. And the other thing I am going to go at the next slide very helpfully is I'm going to talk about mindfulness as a professional practice. So these exercises, these things, these tools I'm sharing with you, one of the reasons I'm doing them on the call is because literally you can drop them in wherever you are, whether you're at home, whether you're at work and with your team. You can share some of this with clients if it's useful. If you do it yourself and you know how to do it, it's much easier to show other folks and share that knowledge with other folks. Yeah. So I'm sure that you will find these mindfulness tools helpful, just because mums are going to be stressed, extra stressed because kids are stressed, and kids then get stressed because mum's stressed. So yes, as well as the practical things, I think mindfulness, just being grounded, is really important just now.
Wonderful. If I can just mention two things from the question box. So people are very interested in the chat box. There should be one in your control panel. Unfortunately, I don't have access to that, but if you're wishing to chat with one another, we encourage you to use that. I don't have access, so if you ask us a question there, I won't be able to see it. A couple of other people have shared some ideas they've had regarding interacting with kids. Leslie shares that they have a children's advocate working from home on a farm, and she's taking the survivors' children on a virtual tour of the farm.
Wow.
Gives the mom a break, and the children loved it.
Wonderful.
Emily says that she's constantly rating their craft box almost every day. Had the children doing craft project. Some of the advocates have started sewing face masks in their free time and use it as a mini fundraiser for their shelter.
Wow.
Lillian calls all of her clients by phone with their okay and their permission. However, she clarifies that she's not necessarily reaching out to those who live with their abuser because it would put them at risk. The mindfulness was extremely relaxing.
Thank you.
Yes, again, many people want to access that chat box, so please look in the control panel. It should be there. Again, I'm sorry, I am not able to see it, but I see a different screen than you all do.
Yeah. Thank you, Gretchen.
You're welcome.
Could I have the next slide, please?
Sure. Okay.
Okay, so going back to my business associate, Aisha's sage wisdom, I mentioned her earlier, and her mindfulness practice. She taught me this. She asked me if I'd heard this concept of drink as you pour. Learn to drink as you pour so the spiritual heart cannot run dry and you always have love to give. Now, I hadn't heard of this term before, but I was interested to understand what it meant and connect that to my frame of reference. As a creative person, I'm really curious, and often this is where I get my inspiration. I'm curious about other people, other things, other cultures, other places, and I get a lot of inspiration from that. It's also a great technique as a manager and a practitioner. It's a great technique for helping us think outside of the box, because we've got a tendency as human beings, we do have a tendency just to stick to what we know, and we can get a little bit stale or a little bit fixed in our lane. So always new ideas, really interest me. Now, how Aisha explained this to me, this concept of drink as you pour, this can relate to mindfulness practice and your professional practice. This is essentially about anchoring your purpose and your integrity as a human being within a professional context. We take ourselves to work, don't we? We bring all of our experience, our values, our ethics to that place. So this concept of drink as you pour invites us to consider our self-care and our ability to be resilient as just a constant cycle or process of nourishing ourselves so that we can support survivors effectively. Now, if we think of it in this way, we think of it as a principle or a practice, then it ceases to be something, it stops to be something that we just add on to our day, which is already a busy day or a very long to-do list. It becomes core to how we work. It becomes core to how we express ourselves, how we live our life, and it translates it into a key principle that underpins our work with survivors. Now, we might call it slightly different things, but in practical terms, it could become your organizational mission statement. It could be embedded into your leadership and your management training and development, that we walk the walk, we don't just talk the talk. So when we start to do things, and I guess the phrase practice what we preach comes to mind, we can then actually make that transition from telling folks about it and doing it to actually it being a part of how we work. And it's a fairly seamless interaction then. And when we give it that meaning, it's a simple tool that just helps us lift our gaze from the immediate constant demands that are in front of us. It helps us reconnect with our body, our mind, and our ideas. And in that way, we become our own medicine and our own ethical and spiritual guide. Yeah, however you define spirituality. I'm not necessarily talking about that in a religious context. I'm talking about that, our kind of aspirations and our higher ideals. It gives us a courage to focus, a courage and a focus, and in a real practical way, it helps us do our job. We're grounded, we're balanced. Rosa Parks says, I want to use this quote. I think it sums it up nicely. She says, you must never be fearful about what you are doing when it is right. And just whilst we are perhaps inspired by Rosa Parks, I want to just take a moment where I invite you to breathe. And I'm going to invite you to activate a positive feeling in you right now through visualization. To activate a positive feeling such as appreciation or joy or love. Think of a special person, a family member, maybe it's your pet, You might recall an enjoyable occasion or a special place that makes you feel good inside. Try to re-experience that feeling now. Just imagine it. And really connect with the joy, the appreciation, and breathe. And that is a very simple way of bringing us back just to the moment, to be present. Too often, we're dragged in different directions because our to-do list just gets longer. Just take a minute a day just to, when you notice you're working at a faster pace, stop for a moment, breathe, and think of something or someone that inspires you. Okay, just a little recap. I've shared some techniques with you that hopefully you find easy to use. We've had some great contributions in the chat, which hopefully is inspiring you and sharing good news. And you can get a link to my PDF Resilience and Leadership Guide that's going to have these tools and more at the end of this seminar. What I want to share with you next, this may be a grand claim, but it's my top 3 most powerful realizations after 30 years of personal and professional development in this work and in this life. It's been a bumpy ride, those 30 years at times, but these realizations absolutely continue to help me, keep me grounded. I rely on them. I come back to them, particularly when I'm in difficult territory or when I'm basically wondering what the heck am I supposed to do here? Yeah, because that can be an unsettling feeling. Could you go on to the next slide, please, Gretchen? There we are. So we work in a context, a challenging context, and resilience. And I just want to look a little bit at what resilience and vicarious trauma means in this context. When we are supporting others in distress, there can often be a compelling feeling to help or to rescue, to alleviate our own feelings of helplessness as we witness someone else's distress. This feeling of helplessness is actually the main source of our anxiety. The profound emotional discomfort of feeling helpless may drive us to look for quick fixes or make rash decisions, often with the same kind of disappointing result. A continued underlying toxic anxiety or fear or exhaustion that just sits with us. The key to preventing this toxic cycle of stress, because actually we can become a little bit numb to it because we get used to higher levels of stress. The key to preventing this toxic cycle of stress is to stimulate our own organic inner pharmacy, our own body chemistry, our biological resistance, regardless of what's happening around us, regardless of those external factors, so that we can be grounded, we can be nourished, we can be protected from the toxic stress that's in our bodies. So maintaining our well-being is crucial, not only for our health, but it's crucial when we're working with others in distress who are relying on us. So for me, this is the meaning of resilience, is that energetically, our mind, our body, our spirit are all aligned, unconsciously working together with our immune system to protect us against these toxic experiences. Now, knowing this allows us to plug into an endless supply of what I would call authentic personal power and calm. We can keep ourselves calm irrespective of what's happening around us. It doesn't mean we don't ever get anxious or stressed, but we get better at noticing when it's happening and have strategies that we can put in place sooner to minimize the impact on us. And in this place, when we're in this place of calm, we are more patient, we're more kind, we're more useful to ourselves and others. Does that resonate with folks, is my question. I can't quite see the chat. I'm trying to concentrate on talking to you. So by all means, Gretchen, let me know if this is. Could we move on to the next slide? I'm going to share the next point with you. That's
Yes.
number one. Yeah. Oh, is it?
It's resonating with people, so please, yes.
Okay. And if I'm not I'm trying to talk not too quickly, but equally not too slowly that we all drift off to sleep. So good. That's good if it's landing. Excellent. Okay. So number two, congruence. I want to share this insight with you. Our values and our idea, and these insights have come from me, from my personal journey as I've tried to do things better and get things right, and also tried to reduce the impact of stress on my physical health and well-being. Our values and our ideas help us navigate through hostile territory where we would otherwise feel lost. Yeah, when we're in a place that feels unfamiliar and strange. It's our values and ideals that can help navigate through what is unfamiliar territory. The profound discomfort of feeling lost or broken will often drive us quickly to look for a relief, to avoid that sensation. We're trying to get away from that feeling. We try to escape these feelings of collapse with often the same kind of exhausting outcome, an inner critical battle between our thinking and our emotions. Now that's what I call heading for burnout. That's conflict. When we have that inner conflict, that is a definite trajectory for burnout. Because day-to-day things take more effort. We feel like we have to push things forward rather than feel the pull of wanting to move forward. So if you want to avoid burnout, definitely listen to this point or get this disfigured. The key to preventing this pain, is to find peace with our frightened self, regardless of what's happening around us. This frightened self is really a useful, helpful part of us because it's often the voice that tells us, I don't know if I want to do that. It feels a little bit scary or it feels a bit uncomfortable. So it's important that we listen to that voice, but we make peace with that part of us so that we can continue to trust our choices and our decisions. Because when we're in conflict, decision-making gets harder. Yeah, is this resonating? So the natural alchemy of intuition, emotion, and knowledge working together is a really, really powerful navigation system. Yeah. And for me, this is the meaning of congruence, that we heal the split and we recover this loss of trust internally by amplifying, by increasing our confidence and our power to make the right choices for us, whatever the situation. That's just, I'm just going to let that settle for a minute. I can't, let me know if there's any chat on that. Okay, cool. Okay, let's move on to the next point while I have your attention then. 16, could you move to the next slide, please, Gretchen?
That work?
That's it, perfect, thank you. So for those of us who may have experienced or have experienced feeling alienated or marginalized based on who we love, how we look, what we believe, or how we think, there's often a feeling of disconnection. What often comes with this feeling is a fear that something is fundamentally wrong with us. However, it's the separation and the marginalization that's the root cause of this emotional pain. It's not our individuality. The profound emotional discomfort of feeling lesser than or shamed can drive us to turn anger in on ourselves or sometimes at others to alleviate that pain. We may push ourselves to exhaustion to try to prove our worth. We might hide our real self in order to fit in or gain the approval of others, all with the same disappointing outcome. We suffocate that authentic part of us that makes us unique. We settle for less. We hide our brilliance under the fear and the shame of never being good enough. So the key to preventing the pain of shame is self-acceptance. Yes. Learning to love those parts of us that others have taught us to hate. Live a full life on our terms, not a half life based on others' expectations. To be true to ourselves and to truly know ourselves. So for me, this is the meaning of wholeness. Brené Brown calls this wholeheartedness, doesn't she? She talks about living wholeheartedly. It's recovering that lost part of self from within, embracing the notion that what makes us different also makes us wonderfully unique. And as we express that level of self-acceptance, we claim our space, we hold our own, we galvanize others. The very nature of advocacy work, or any work with a social impact, requires a wholehearted approach. It requires us to show up, to lean in, and that just got harder in the last few weeks. And also, survivors are really good at spotting when we're not being authentic, when we're not being transparent, and when we ourselves are struggling. Yeah? I want to check in at that point, Gretchen. Does that resonate with people? Does that make sense? Or maybe with you, I'm interested to know your view, Gretchen, if you have one.
Yes, we got a response. Wow, just wow. Yes, okay. People are really it's resonating with people. There was also one person who asked if you could give an example of finding peace with your frightened self.
Oh, that's a great question. It happens. It happens a lot. That's a really good question. What I've learned to do, what I personally have learned to do, is just really tune in much more to what's happening in my body and not just think things. When I think things, that's when my brain can become a little bit like a train on a track, and it just gets faster and faster, because my brain, you know, wants to work fast, and my brain also wants to fix things and find a solution for things. And when I can't fix it, then that really stresses me out, you know. And I've come to learn that, well, be at peace, you know, there's things we cannot change. There's external factors that we are not in control of. And it really is about coming into yourself, listening to your body, having different techniques and information available to you. You make a much better decision when your mind is calm and your body and your emotions are all aligned. Then you feel what I call, often I call with coaches and coaching sessions, I talk about a pull factor. There's a flow, there's a different energy. We're all energetic beings. And we all know that feeling of joy and love. And when we feel we're doing something that is meaningful to us, it's uplifting, it's energizing. Those are great emotions. They're great chemicals to be running around your body. When you don't feel those things, it's an indicator that maybe there's a frightened part of you that is starting to wants to be noticed. And it's about listening to that, acknowledging it, not letting it drive the car. Is that what Brené Brown, is that an example that Brené Brown uses? It's Liz Gilbert talks about that. Do you know Liz Gilbert? She's a writer. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love. She's written other things. She talks about fear in the process. She talks about the creative process as a constant process of putting yourself out there. Yeah. And she listens to that part herself and that voice, but she never lets it get in the driver's seat. So I would recommend you listen to some Liz Gilbert about some techniques. And I'm sure for those of you that not only use mindfulness, but maybe you've got some therapeutic tools and techniques, maybe you've done some inner child work, some of this stuff will be familiar to you. Does that help? Does that answer the question? That was a little bonus question.
Yes, they're liking the wholeness approach. They have there is a question in here. I'm trying to decipher it. So Dahlia asks, is radical acceptance similar to dialectical behavior therapy?
Ooh, that's a big question. Who asked that question?
Her name is Dahlia.
Dahlia, wow, what a great question, Dahlia. I think it is if you find the connection with it. You know, the joy of the creative process and being eclectic is that we can take learning from different sources and we can build it into our framework of reference. So I would say it can be, I don't know enough about the technical detail of those two philosophies and approaches, but they sound like there may be some connections. And I think maybe that's your homework tonight, is that you figure out what the connections are and you can come back and tell the rest of us. Yeah, but it's a good question. Okay, can I take you on to the next slide, Gretchen? Or is there any other burning questions?
Yes, I'm going through them now,
Okay.
making sure we're not missing anything. People love Elizabeth
Yeah, sure.
Gilbert and Brene Brown, of course. Let's see. Poetry, yes, they're agreeing that healing poetry is just an incredible tool. So
yes, super, wonderful, thank you.
yes, so next slide.
Cool. I just want to say a little something about resilience in context. Let's reflect on this notion of resilience, because the word gets thrown around quite a lot, I think. And I often think resilience is presented as something you either have or you have not. You know, or specifically, it's seen as an ability to bounce back from adversity. Now, let's unpack this just a little bit. So this is partly what my brain does when my frightened self is saying, what does this mean? Do I have resilience? Maybe I don't have resilience, and that inner dialogue is going on. What the heck is resilience? So I think let's just reflect on what is resilience, and what does this bouncing back mean? Because bouncing back implies it's relatively easy or fairly immediate, which of course implies if you don't bounce back, then you're not resilient, which it's a very negative-based approach to thinking about resilience. It's not a strength-based approach. When I think of cultural and social scripts, what I grew up with in my hometown, does everyone know what I mean by that? You know, just the messages that you grew up with when you were a child, or, you know, and in society. There's key things that you pick up and you hear. Consistent message that I received in relation to going through difficult experiences, because there's almost an acceptance that life is going to be difficult. As well, you just have to pick yourself up and get on with it. Right? It's a very flippant, well, you know, happens to us all, you've just got to pick yourself up and get on with it. And I love listening to Brene Brown when she talks. She's a great storyteller, and she talks about the cultural scripts that she grew up with as a Texan, growing up in Texas. And she really can make us laugh and connect with that experience at that level. And she talks about being tough, not just falling down. There wasn't even an option to, you know, bouncing back. There wasn't an option to fall down. So, you know, you wouldn't bounce back. You just had to be tough. And if we listen, we can hear similar things in a range of cultures and societies, you know. So when we work with trauma, particularly complex post-traumatic stress, traumatic events have already overwhelmed the whole body system. And whether you've experienced abuse directly yourself or not, in this work, vicarious trauma is a risk for sure. Our system may be in a constant state of alert, and even non-threatening situations feel anxiety-inducing or dangerous. Therefore, some strategies that might work in other ordinary contexts, if I can call them that, won't necessarily work when we're working with trauma in this level. For example, I'll give you a really practical example. Has anyone ever calmed down when they've been told, you just need to calm down? Has that ever worked for you? You know, or another phrase I hear, well, you just fake it till you make it. That's when you're absolutely terrified. It's not quite as easy to do that. So in Trauma in Recovery, if you don't know this author and this book, I would highly recommend it, that you do get a copy. Trauma in Recovery by Judith Lewis Herman. She says, traumatic events are extraordinary, not because they occur rarely, but rather because they overwhelm the ordinary human adaptations to life. So we need a more compassionate, sophisticated way of understanding how to model, how to build, how to manage, and how to implement strategies for resilience in ourselves and in our organizations. So I'm going to invite you just now, you have a think about what that might look like for you in your particular environment, and how you could build upon that internally for yourself and also for your organization. clinical psychologist Meg Jay, beg your pardon, she talks about this notion of bouncing back. She said she challenges this idea of bouncing back from adversity. People do not feel understood when someone says, wow, you really bounced back from that. They don't feel seen in all of their complexity in terms of how hard it can be. Instead, she describes resilience as a heroic struggle. It's really a battle. It's not a bounce, she says. It's an ongoing process that can last for years. So the strategies that we choose are not only affected by traumatic events, but by the social, cultural, the economic, environmental systems that we've all grown up in and exist in. Whether we feel connected to them or not, whether we believe in them or not. And I like to think, well, I often say, I consider domestic abuse or gender-based violence. It's not an individual issue, but it is a social problem. Can you hear me okay? Because I'm getting a little interference in my headphone. You hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, that's good.
People are asking if you can repeat the name of the book.
Yes, Judith Lewis Herman, Trauma and Recovery. And there is a subtitle which I cannot remember off the top of my head, but it's a fantastic subtitle from, I don't know, I'm going to have to come back to it. But if you Google Judith Lewis Herman, you should trauma and recovery. You should get that link straight to that book. So many of the systems that you're working with and within to do your job, you know, are. Let me take a breath before I say this. In my experience, a lot of the systems that I have worked within to do my job, to do my work, are broken or they're buckling under the strain. When things aren't working and we are constantly exposed to things that reflect our disappointment, then empowerment just becomes so much harder to achieve for us as professionals, as well as for the survivors that we're trying to support. Does that make sense? We are constantly or often in situations where we feel disempowered. Yeah. Sometimes those things that disempower us are quite invisible, and therefore any advocacy or support that we try to do with an individual or a specific community is really complex. It's not a quick fix. And our frustration can come out at the individual because they're not taking our advice. Maybe they're not telling us everything and we think they should. Maybe they're not behaving how we want them to behave. And then maybe I'm being a little bit tongue-in-cheek here, maybe they're just messing up our to-do list. We had a list of things we'd planned to do this day, and boom, something's just come up we've had to deal with. This is part of the impact of vicarious trauma when you notice those feelings of frustration. So I encourage you and invite you to just notice when that's happening in yourself, in your body, when that judgment of others is coming in, or that impatience with others. Because if the survivors that we work with, or the families or the communities we work with, if they don't believe that we understand them or the situations that they're managing, they are not going to trust us. They will not trust you enough for you to be able to help them in the way that they need helping, the way they need help. Please go on to the next slide, Gretchen. I just want to roll quickly into this next one and then I'll check in. Conscious of time. Empowerment. So I thought this is a helpful quote from Erin Murphy-Graham. She is an academic and researcher in the education department, the University of California. She explains it like this. Education does not automatically result in women's empowerment, as the social and economic context in which women live can pose overwhelming constraints on their choices. So I'm going to invite you to think about this and put this to you. We are all somewhere on a scale or a continuum of privilege and disadvantage. Different things depending on our circumstances and the combination of those circumstances. Kimberly Crenshaw's work on intersectionality is a really valuable tool for organizations. You're supporting marginalized individuals and communities, just generally about your awareness of intersectionality. If you understand how disadvantage affects families and individuals seeking help, then you can make your organizations and your services more accessible to the people that really need your help. So we understand the concept, when we understand the concept of inequality and intersectionality, our job then as managers, as leaders, as advocates, is to make that work, put that into practice within our organizations to enable, to reduce those barriers for survivors accessing our services. Could you flick to the next slide, Gretchen? And this may help you. Just, it's a diagram that may be of use. This will be in the PDF handout, the PDF document that you're going to get, Resilience and Leadership Tools. In her book, Resilience, Elizabeth Edwards discusses adversities that she's faced. Many of you may know her. She's a high-profile figure, public figure. Well, she died, I think, of cancer a few years ago. The diagram below is a good checklist to assess levels of resilience. Now, in coaching, I sometimes use a wheel of balance to help folks understand where there's imbalances in their life-work balance. This diagram struck me as a useful tool that you may be able to use within your organizations or with yourself. It looks at those 4 different dimensions. Okay, that's it. Finally, I'm coming to the end of what I had intended to say, Gretchen, so I'm conscious of time. Unless, yeah, and I want to give you a chance just to do a check-in at the end, but I do want to, I would like to go on to the next slide. So this diagram will be in the PDF document that you get. I want to finally, I just want to say something to those of you that are in leadership and management positions. It's tough at the top, and there's always somebody above you, isn't there? That you have to report to. I go back to Brené Brown, and one of the most striking things I think that she says is, and her whole notion of vulnerability and leadership. When we lead, we have to lead from a place of vulnerability, from the arena. And I had a conversation with Gretchen last week, maybe it was the week before, I can't remember now, Gretchen, when things, you know, so much had changed since our initial conversation. And this question of what do managers do at this time? And I think management is a little bit like parenting, You can read the theories and you can get the book, but actually once the kids come along, the manual just goes out the window, yeah? That's my experience of management. And sometimes I can think, yeah, this is how something's going to work, and it doesn't necessarily work. So you have to think on your feet a lot. So I'm empathizing with all of you that have got supervision and management experience at the minute. It's not easy at the best of times. And podcasts and interviews, if you listen to Brené Brown, she explains her own thinking around leadership, how that's changed as she's undertaken her research. And she says, I think this is really interesting. She says, I used to think that leadership was about motivating and managing. The research showed her that motivate was seen as manipulate. Motivation is not sustainable. Leaders have to inspire. What inspires? Leaders who are courageous and show up. So here's my top 5 tips for leaders. And hopefully this makes a lot more sense now that I've taken you on this little journey through this previous insights I've shared with you. Be authentic. Know your values, develop your strengths, your self-awareness, and your emotional intelligence. That's a really, really useful tool. You know, your professional curiosity is your superpower, and making that genuine connection with people in your teams, in your organizations, and in allied organizations is such an important resource. Find your calling, do work that matters to you. It's much, much easier for us to inspire others if we're genuinely enthusiastic, inspired by what we do and where we work. Stay healthy and grounded. Please just nourish your body and your energy system. Think of yourself as a whole system, not just a bit that thinks, and sometimes a heart that gets broken when you can't do what you want to do. And be effective in your role and have the reach that you want to, or the influence that you want to. Seek balance. It's really important to stay grounded. rest and repair, listen to your body, create a good life-work balance, and invest in that balance. And build those networks and those meaningful connections with other professionals and social support available to you. Brené Brown has said to us, this pandemic experience is a massive experiment in collective vulnerability. We can be our worst selves when we are afraid, or we can be our very best, bravest selves. Could you move to the next slide, please, Gretchen?
Yes.
So I just want to round up with Brené. When we lead, we have to lead from a place of vulnerability, from the arena. And my associate Aisha, thank you for this. She sent me this yesterday. An old African proverb that says, and if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Could you flick to the last slide? There we are. And there's the link to the tools, but I think Gretchen's already popped them in the chat.
Yes, the tools are within the handouts.
Okay.
Thank you all for sharing all of your feedback. The audience has really loved this and has found it, or those that have shared have said they found it incredibly helpful, wonderful resource. This was just lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Others are asking how you can be reached.
Yes, so how I can be reached. On the document, the PDF document, Strategies for Resilience, or Resilience Tools, the complementary resilience tools, on each page there is a link that will take you to my private Facebook group, so you can connect with me there. And I post content on there, free content. You'll get information about my coaching programs as they come up. And I also every Friday I do a Power of 4 playlist where I just put some music together and I just pop that in the Facebook group just for laughs, just for the sheer heck of it. So
that's
music
wonderful.
It's a great connector. So for sure you can connect with me there.
Aw, people are just. Someone shares, this has brought tears to my eyes as I sit realizing this is exactly what I needed at the very different time in life. Stay well. Lovely webinar, great webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. This is wonderful. Kath, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for your energy. I really want to do a good job for you today because it's tough out there.
You did. They're living it. So just as we close out the webinar, we're at our hour and a half. So, and people are not asking questions, but just sharing that they really needed this. Again, we have a free webinar next week. Please go to our webinar page if you're interested in signing up. We will be sending you a recording of this, a link to a certificate of participation, as well as handouts and contact information for Kath. And yeah, that's it from us for now. Thank you so much, Kath. This was wonderful.
It's been a pleasure working with you, Gretchen. It really has.
Lovely working with you as well. Okay, we'll end the audience and then Kath will follow up with you following, okay?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Sure, anything you need.
Wonderful. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day and thank you again. Take good care.